one of the things that felt so, um, when I look back and think about what was happening years and years ago around this idea of dysfunctional, irrational thinking that kind of had a quality of the client had a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
when I think about trauma, it's really important to not put the trauma client in the place of blame. It's not their fault that they were traumatized. And so ACT offered an alternative to that, that it wasn't that they had some kind of dysfunctional thinking, it's their learning history in combination with trauma that led them into the struggle and the suffering that they had. I found it much more compassionate, much more accepting. And so finding the ACT work and implementing it across time has just felt like a very heartfelt place to work with folks who are suffering behind traumatic incidents. And so hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, of course. As someone who has worked extensively with veterans and people who have experienced severe trauma, what lessons do you believe are universal in the healing process?
Probably the most universal thing that I can think of across every kind of trauma where people are suffering is avoidance of self, avoidance of experience. Like it just doesn't matter whether you're a veteran, a child sexual abuse survivor, a sexual assault survivor, domestic violence. Avoidance just captures all of the, not all the difficulties, but a huge majority of the difficulties that people are struggling with. And if you can reduce avoidance, you're going to have a huge impact on anybody's life in those who fall into those categories.
Okay, great. Let's change the subject, Robyn. I'm sorry we are going so fast because we have so few time.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. We can
You're,
schedule another one if you want to. I'm happy to come back.
yeah. Anyone who wants to ask, you are all allowed to ask, please. About the work conference, because we are inviting here people to assist. People from Peru, Argentina, Brazil are here. So at this conference, you will be leading an intensive workshop on ACT for Trauma. Can you give us a preview, some spoiler alert of what participants can expect to learn in your workshop?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the things that I think is really important in trauma work is you need to expose to the trauma specifically, the content of the trauma, the imagery, the emotional experience, the sensation. And so in the workshop, I'm going to walk people through 3 stages of trauma treatment from an ACT perspective, grounding everything in ACT, where we'll look at how to prepare somebody to do stage 2, and then how to do different kinds and very specific kinds of exposure with trauma survivors to the traumatic material, not just to their emotions writ large, but to the traumatic material. And then we'll do some stage 3 work, which really kind of wraps us up into a place of values based action and committed action. I'll be introducing more things about bringing the body into the work, somatic experiencing, and talking about different skills and ways to adjust the work that you're doing so that
Yeah,
it keeps the trauma survivor engaged. Because of the high avoidance, you've got to do different things to keep them
yeah.
engaged. And then I'll also be asking people to work on their own fears about working with trauma and doing exposure work. So we'll be doing some personal work as well as we walk through the workshop.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Another one about the ACBS World Conference. We are waiting for you here to dance tango, right?
Yes. I might not dance tango. I'll dance something, but I don't know if I can dance tango.
Dance something. I
I'll do
mean,
my best. I'll do my best.
We're going to teach you, don't worry.
Okay, wonderful.
The conference will offer content in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. How do you think that linguistic and cultural diversity will enrich the conference experience?
I'm actually very excited about this part of it.
Yeah,
And because it's so much more invitational and allows everybody to participate at a much higher level. It's more sensitive to the folks who don't have English as a first language. So
yeah,
I'm super thrilled that it's happening. And I was just talking yesterday with the panel that we're doing on trauma, where it's just a clinical panel. And
yeah.
one of the individuals on the panel only speaks Turkish. And so we're also managing a Turkish translation. So we're going to try to do Turkish, Spanish, and Portuguese. So we'll see how it all works out. But I think it's really wonderful. And I'm very excited.
That is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And speaking about the development on and future of ACT, what recent developments in ACT research do you find most exciting or promising for the future of psychotherapy?
Um, ooh, that could be a loaded question.
You can speak about IA or whatever you
Okay.
want to speak. You can give your point of view about that.
Okay. There are some interesting so I kind of stand in two places in terms of what's happening. So there's some interesting technological developments that allow you to have more reach. You can get out to more people through things like phone apps and online self-guided intervention,
Mhm.
supporting people who don't need as much therapy through sending out different things to them.
Yeah.
But I worry very much about how much time people are like this, right? Like people spend their lives like, yes. Like I walk down the street or drive down the street and you just look at people and they're just glued to their phone. And we now know that it's actually causing mental health problems in teenagers and youngsters, that the more they use the phone, the more depressed they are.
Yeah.
So I think we have a dilemma, and I'm not sure if that technology is going to help or harm. And if we're
Yeah.
going to use technology, we got to find a way to say things like, hey, get off your phone and go do stuff, right? Like to make it more workable. And process-based therapy is
Yes.
rolling around out there, and there's a little bit of controversy if anybody's reading the listserv right now. And um, right now, my view is that it's a tool, it's not a therapy. And so there needs to be work done in order for it to be more connected to the
Yeah.
therapist and the relationship between the client and the therapist. Because
Mhm.
that relationship is the vehicle through
Yeah.
which the therapy is delivered. And if you look at the data on the therapeutic relationship, it's a moderate correlation across time,
Yes.
but it's robust. So again and again and again and again, the therapeutic relationship accounts for a decent amount of variance in change for the individual, and it just can't be ignored. And so that therapeutic relational part is still, I I think, is PBT hasn't quite got there yet, in my humble opinion, and I'm probably going to catch hell from a lot of people for saying that. So I just want to say, from where I stand, there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
And to bring it into the therapy room means not making it a big technical phone-based, looking at your phone, pointing to things on the phone. What we need to connect as human beings.
Yes.
And we're in trouble because we're not connecting as human beings. We're seeing people as objects instead of flesh and blood, and we need to come back to flesh and blood, in my
Yeah.
humble opinion.
Exactly. Thank you very much for your opinion. Do you do online therapy?
I do. I do online therapy,
Can I
and
be your client? No.
I'll put you to work, Victor.
Okay, okay. I'm willing. I'm willing. And do you find it harder to do online therapy than in-person therapy?
Probably not harder, but different. So, during the pandemic, I wasn't going to my office at all, and I was just spending money. So finally I closed the office and just moved all my clients online, and the data show that they work relatively equivalently. So I was sort of hanging on to that idea. You have more reach, you can see more people in different places. So again, greater access. I do feel like I missed what I call the warmth of the therapy room. Because this is a pretty cold medium, right?
Yes.
It's a cold medium. And so I missed that warmth. And I like to be able to read all of the client's body language. I can only read from here up. Like I just get the top half of their body language. And so that means I'm missing information. And so I try to do some things to compensate for the changes that are happening in way. For instance, I ask people to sit back just a little bit, like I'm sitting back a little bit, so I don't just see just their face. I
Yes.
don't let clients lie down while they're talking to me. I ask them to put their phones away and turn off their notifications. I do a number of things to make sure the sound is good. I have to work a little bit slower so that I make sure I'm capturing things that might otherwise be missed in this medium. So there's some benefits, right, in terms of access and reach and convenience, but there's some losses too. And so it's why I'm so grateful we're meeting in person in Argentina so I can get that warmth.
Yeah. That is going to be awesome, awesome. Um, alguém quiere perguntar? Alguém quiere fazer alguma pergunta para Robyn? Vocês podem escrever lá, pueden escribir acá en el chat y lo vamos traduciendo, ¿sí? O alguien si habla inglés lo puede preguntar. Hay una pregunta también que teníamos. We have a question here. And what impact do you expect the ACBS 2024 conference to have on the community of therapists and behavioral scientists in Argentina and in Latin America in general? Because we are so exciting. You are coming here. You have no idea. It's like the Beatles coming to Argentina. We are going to scream and shout, and you're going to feel so warm.
That sounds so lovely. I feel a little embarrassed, but that sounds really, really lovely. My hope is that the conference will be received in such a way that it'll create buzz throughout the therapist community, not just our local community of ACBSers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that it'll continue to spread throughout South America, basically. And so it's an exciting intervention. And I know, or well, I don't know, I've heard that there's a lot of more psychodynamic or psychoanalytic therapists who I hope they get kind of interested, and that maybe they'd be kind of curious and come along or something like that. So I hope that this really ignites a bit of a fire and gets people interested, both those who are already there, like they really get in there and find stuff that fits for them and works for who they're seeing in their clinical practice and in doing it and their research, and that it also creates a buzz that gets other people interested in as well.
Great. Here, Diego Araya asks, what can you tell us about the empirical evidence of act-based intervention for trauma?
So there's a small body of literature, probably, I'm guessing 15 to 20 studies that have been done, single case design, open group, and one randomized controlled trial, but I should talk about that RCT just a little bit because it's not an RCT on trauma, but it included a measurement of PTSD. The data so far are good. It shows significant reductions in PTSD symptoms if you're looking at PTSD symptoms. I think that, well, let me talk about that randomized controlled trial for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, okay. All right. I was wondering. I just wondered if they were wanting me to clarify something.
No.
So in the randomized controlled trial, they were comparing veterans receiving ACT for high levels of distress. So they were investigating transdiagnostic conditions. And they were comparing ACT to present-centered therapy. And I don't know how familiar people are with present-centered therapy, but it is an active therapy and does show significant reductions in PTSD if you use it as a therapy. So it's what here in the States we call a second tier therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So first tier is prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then second tier is present-centered therapy, EMDR, a couple of other therapies like that. And so when they're making recommendations, they want you to start with the top tier and then go down the tier to if something doesn't work. It doesn't work that way all the time. So we compared ACT to present-centered therapy, and they both showed significant reductions in PTSD in an RCT, but it wasn't a trauma trial. So I want to make clear about that. I'm not sure that a randomized controlled trial is the way to go here. And I actually thought about doing one myself. I work at the National Center for PTSD, and I submitted a grant to do an RCT. And ultimately, we didn't pursue it. I do think that if you look at idiographic versus nomothetic data, we have a real problem in the field of psychotherapy, and RCTs are not the answer to our problem. We've got to change the way we do our research. So if we, keep getting a lot of individual cases built across time, we're really looking at what's happening for this person given their circumstance, their situation. Every trauma case I see is different, and I work differently with each one. Then we can start building a better database than the database that we have right now. So the data is supportive, but it doesn't have like what they call an EBP here in the States, an evidence-based psychotherapy designation. But I'm suspicious of all therapies that now have an evidence-based psychotherapy designation because it's all been done through randomized controlled trials. And it takes us back to one of the very first questions you asked. Are these culturally sensitive? And the answer to that is no. They are not. The participants in most of these studies are white Anglo-Saxon participants. They don't account for cultural factors. And so there's problems with RCTs on multiple levels. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I say is we're standing on the shoulders of giants who've done horrific research over time. Like don't want to dismiss the work that they've done at all. They've helped us move in a good direction to think about science, right? But I think we have to now reconsider and think about how to better that science. And it might mean that the evidence base looks different than it has in the past. It's kind of a longer answer to the question, but for the type of data we've collected, there's a small body of supportive data. And what I do, and I'm going to teach this in my workshop, is if you look at what's called written exposure therapy or expressive writing, like the Pennebaker kind of writing stuff, is I incorporate that in as an official exposure to the trauma, to the ACT work. And it's very ACT consistent, and you can build in a short intervention with strong evidence, and that beefs up your outcomes.
Great, super great.
That was a long answer to that question, but I probably could have talked about that for an hour by itself.
They have to go to your conference, so if they want an answer, a longer answer.
By the way, can I add one thing to the
Yes,
question
of course.
about ACBS being in Argentina and what I hope happens? It's so wonderful. It's going to be in South America. And I hope that people learn how great it is to go to South America, so there can be more conferences in South America. So that's another thing that I hope comes out of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I've enjoyed every time I've been there, and I think people need to come down and visit South America.
If you need some warm, you're going to receive here warm hugs, kisses. So be fully open to receive hugs and kisses, and we're going to be like
I'm ready.
Well, we have only 7 more minutes. We don't want to bother you. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta más o cierro con alguna preguntita más, María José?
No, digo que había en el chat, Vic, alguna pregunta en
Sí.
portugués, ¿la puedes leer?
Había una reflexión en portugués. Entiendo la manera cotidianos simples de la crianza. Ay, Juan Ignacio, me mandaste un texto más largo. I have to read a whole text so I can translate it.
Yeah, no worries.
¿Cuáles son las experiencias traumáticas cotidianas que ella considera serían importantes y relativamente más simples de prevenir, concientizar, educar? Hacemos una pregunta más concreta, Juan Ignacio, porque entiendo yo la pregunta, pero si la tengo que traducir voy a estar 20 años. Espera, vamos a hacerlo más fácil. He says, speaking about trauma, that it can come from different aspects of the daily life, and especially speaking about how the way you grow up. And he says, speaking about your experiences, which are the most traumatic daily life experiences that you consider and relatively most simple that you can prevent or be aware of, or educate people to say, hey, you know what? This is happening. This happens all the time, or a huge part of the time. Please help us to be aware of your child or your siblings. What would you suggest to people to?
Yeah, I think that probably well, at least in my clinical work, and one of the things that I see leads to really deep struggle and suffering is childhood trauma involving family and domestic violence. And so when children are physically treated badly, or they're witnessing their typically their mom, it can be their dad too, being physically violent towards each other.
Yeah.
Those folks in my practice really struggle. They have difficulty forming trustworthy relationships. They have difficulty knowing what healthy relationships are. They have a lot of self criticism and self-worth difficulties and struggles. And so emotional abuse can play a part in that, although that's emotional abuse, at least here in the States, doesn't qualify as a criterion A trauma, although it can be quite damaging. So when I think about what is the thing that we can do societally around the world, is to find and use better ways to help raise our children that don't involve violence towards
Yeah.
towards partners, relational, or
Yeah.
towards children.
Natalia, tenés el micrófono abierto, gracias.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that would, if I were just to pick one, I mean, there's many things we could do, but if I were just going to pick one thing in this moment, that would be it. Would be it. We need to just reduce violence everywhere, basically. That's cooperative communities. No, it doesn't mean you don't have consequences for children, right? You've got to have consequences, otherwise you have kids who are self-absorbed and just, you know, but have the consequences fit the thing. If you spill milk, don't slap the kid, have them clean the milk up, right? Like there's very easy ways to manage this, but folks just have a really hard time with.
Yes, great. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Yes. Fernanda Cristina Celestino says, here in Brazil, evidence-based interventions are very complicated. I would like to know, how do you see the future of psychology in South America? If you have any idea, or you can help us.
Yeah. Well, so as I look at some therapies, they, you know, the models are a bit complicated to learn, depending on whether it's ACT or psychodynamic or, you know, other therapies. I think that we do have to grapple with the challenges that the models present. And I don't know that simplification is the answer. I think the way we teach has got to probably change in some way. Like, I don't know how many of you've ever read some of the books in ACT where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm scratching my head here. This is going to take me a little bit of time to get through. I don't understand. What does this mean? But you're not alone. I have that happen to me too. And so I just have to grapple a bit with understanding. And the way I think about it is that I want to be a lifelong learner. And I've been doing ACT for 30 years and I'm still learning interesting things. I'm now grappling with PBT and what is process-based therapy and is it overcomplicated? And, you know, I think ultimately as a clinician, when I come into the therapy room, I want to speak from the heart and help somebody to change their life in values-based ways. And so if I were just going to simplify something, it's like, let's be here as two people, two human beings, and what matters to you? What do you care about? Life is too short. Let's get you living. And so if I could just boil it down to that and simplify it, that would be what it would be. And grapple with the model and try to be consistent with the model for the rest of your life. That's one way to put it.
Exactly. Life is too short. And speaking about that, Gustavo Martins, representing Brazil, was saying, please, we need to translate Robyn Walser's book into Portuguese and into Spanish. Obviously, you're doing a great job with Manuela. And when is going to happen, this translation?
If anybody on this call wants to undertake a task, reach out to me.
Yes.
Because we just need somebody who speaks Portuguese and understands ACT, who's willing to do it. Gustavo. Well, then.
Gustavo, you have a shop here.
Yeah, because there are ways to make it happen, and that would be really, really lovely. Can I ask the group a question?
What, sorry?
Can I ask the group a question?
Sí, of course, yes.
Is there something you're really wanting to see in my workshop?
¿Hay algo que quieran?
Yeah.
And the answer is, ¿qué queremos ver de Robyn? ¿Qué queremos ver de Robyn? ¿Qué quieren en el workshop?
Besides the tango.
The dancing part. You're
the
going
dancing
to dance.
part.
Víctor, tengo una pregunta.
Sí,
Hola,
Caro.
Robyn. Me gustaría que hablaras sobre el tratamiento en sobrevivientes de abuso sexual y si eso va a aparecer en realidad, preguntarle.
She would like to know, she would like you to work on the workshop on sexual abuse.
Yes. All right. That I will absolutely be talking about sexual abuse. That'll be part of the work that we do.
Yes.
It's a huge problem, and so we'll
Mm.
talk about. All right. Importance of ACT and PBT. Oh, Fernanda, we actually have a panel on that, on the importance of ACT and PBT. And so do come to that panel, because myself and Steve and I think I can't remember who else is on it, but we're going to be talking about process-based therapy. And I might talk a little bit about it in the ACT workshop, but more so on that panel that's happening.
Yeah. Robyn, I think time is over. You have to go to another meeting. We are so grateful you gave us this meeting for us, and we hope to see you here in Buenos Aires in July, and be prepared because you're going to receive a lot of hugs.
I am going to be prepared, and I hope you all come and say hello. Come say hello.
Muchísimas gracias a todos e todas por haber participado. Muito obrigado a todas as pessoas do Brasil também aqui. Y esperamos que verlos en la World Conference en julio, así que anótense, así nos damos muchos abrazos con Robyn y nos conocemos todos en persona. Así que muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Robyn. You are such a wonderful human being, and it is nice to meet you
Okay.
here and in person in the future. So thank you very much.
See you guys.
Gracias, Gustavo.
See you
Gustavo
in
y
July.
Vanessa. See you in July. Gustavo y Vanessa
Bye.
son unos genios. Vocês são máximo. Gustavo, você top. Vanessa también. Muchas gracias, Vanessa. Sos una genia. Te queremos un montón.
Thank you for the translators too. Thank you to the
Yes.
translators.
Thank you very much for them.
Right. Bye, everybody.
Chao. Gracias a todos y todas.
¿La sabes?
Nos vemos, David. Bye bye.